Hello, Bio30, and welcome to our lesson on the ovaries and oogenesis. In your notes, this is lesson 3, the female feedback loop and the menstrual cycle. So what we're going to do today is talk about how the ovaries develop a follicle, and we're going to match it to the process of oogenesis. And we're going to look then at the diagram of the ovary and really start to understand what stages are found in the ovary at the follicle, ova, and corpus luteum stages. So you have this diagram in your notes. How we're going to label it is listen very carefully because your diagram in your notes is a little bit different than the diagram here. So we're going to start off by looking for this structures right here in your notes. You should notice a small box here, and you are going to label that structure the immature follicle. The immature follicle is just a really small follicle that hasn't started developing yet inside the ovary. It is eventually going to become our egg. Now, the next box has a number 1 for you, in which you're going to write the developing follicle produces estrogen and some progesterone. So that's your number 1 box. Along with your number 1 box, you need to write the developing follicle in there so that you're labeling these structures. The box in your notes is really big. It has a number 1. Just make sure that you write number 1, developing follicles produced estrogen and some progesterone, and then just within that box 2, put a number 2 with the developing follicles. Followed by that, you already have in your notes the mature follicle labeled for you. If you could put a number 3 beside that. You then need to fill out number 4, the ovum. Followed by that, you're going to fill in number 5, the ovum released. You have it there. You just need to label it number 5. You'll notice right below number 5 is a box that has a number 2. That is this right here. The ovulation mature follicle releases ovum. Okay, that's number 2. In between box 2 and 3 on your notes is a little tiny box that you are going to put the corpus luteum in. That's structure 6. And then you'll notice that there is a 3, a box with a 3. You're going to write corpus luteum produces some progesterone and some estrogen in it. And then last but not least, you're going to write the corpus luteum degenerates in box 4. So once you're done, all the boxes should be filled out and all the structures should be labeled 1 through 6. Once you have that filled out, what you're going to do is you're going to, from stage 2, essentially, right here, draw an arrow around all the way to the ovum released, and we're going to call that the follicular phase. So you can just draw that into your notes. And then starting from the ovum, kind of right here, the corpus luteum section, you're going to draw another arrow up and over, and that's called the luteal phase. Now, none of this really makes sense yet. We're just labeling this diagram because we're going to work with understanding what do we mean by the process of an ovum creating an egg. All right. Now, what we're going to do along the side here as well is we're going to add in the steps, essentially, of the feedback loop, but you're going to draw it one more time. I'm just trying to connect the two. So we're going to start with, along the side, the hypothalamus releases our gonadotropin releasing hormone, and it's going to start to get the anterior pituitary to start creating and releasing some really key hormones. The anterior pituitary releases our FSH follicle stimulating hormone, and that is what is being released in this stage here to start developing our follicles. That's why this is called the follicular phase. That's why you drew this arrow, is because the follicles are starting to develop due to the follicle stimulating hormone. Once we've reached mature follicles, we are now at the point in which estrogen, as you can see in step 1 here, estrogen is being released. LH then will rise from and start to be released from the anterior pituitary gland to target the ovary to release the ovum. So LH is the hormone that will cause ovulation, which is what we look at step 2, and what we're seeing at step 5 with the ovum released. Once we have ovulation occurring and the egg discharged, this structure, which was the mature ovum, will reclose up and shrink down into something called the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum then produces progesterone if the ovum is not fertilized. So these are part of what we would call the picture of the ovary. So you need to make sure you label this picture as according to what you see here so that we can have a good idea of what each stage is called. And then just write down the general feedback loop of what's occurring. Now, reminding ourselves that we will look at the feedback loop in depth and connect these back. We will be working and labeling this diagram once again. So on to the next part is looking at a process called oogenesis. Now, oogenesis is the same as spermatogenesis. Spermatogenesis is the creation of sperm. Oogenesis is the creation of the ovum or the egg. Now, you will notice there are a lot of very similar words to spermatogenesis. So at the beginning of spermatogenesis, we have a spermatogonium. Here we have an oogonium. So our oogonium starts us off as a diploid cell, and it is going to go through a growth phase to make a diploid cell, which is our primary oocyte. This is labeled in your notes, so I would highlight and make sure that you understand, or write bigger if you need to, if you can't read the diagram in your notes. Our primary oocyte will split through a process of meiosis to create some secondary oocytes. Now, you will notice that there's these little letters right here that say the first polar body. A polar body for females just means that you're not actually going to have any resources put towards that egg. Instead, it's going to just continue on and not actually have any genetic material in it that we're going to use. So the body goes through the second phase of meiosis too to create haploid cells. So that's what these are, haploid cells. These are the same. And what ends up happening is only one of these haploid cells will receive enough of the female's energy to grow a full ovum. The rest will become polar bodies, which are not used and are just discarded. Okay, so females only can create one egg at a time, or should only be creating one egg at a time. The rest become polar bodies because they want to create the best egg possible. Now, along with that, we're now taking our knowledge of oogenesis and spermatogenesis and applying it. So we've now created an ovum, which is from the female, and we now have a sperm, which was created from the male. And you can see that fertilization occurs here to create a full set of chromosomes. And that full set of chromosomes would be found within a zygote, because once an egg meets a sperm, okay, that's fertilization, and we refer to the next structure as a zygote. It is diploid, or 2N, meaning in humans it has 46 chromosomes. So that is the processes. So make sure you have your notes filled out for the ovary, as well as labeling and making sure you can read oogenesis correctly. Thanks, and have a great day.